The Egyptian gods. They might not be as popular as the Greek or the Nordic gods, but the Egyptian gods are pretty cool in their own right and also pretty strong. But just how powerful are they? Well, the correct answer is, who cares, nerd? But I'm gonna tell you anyways. However, before we begin, let's meet the main players. Osiris, lord of the underworld. Isis, wife of Osiris. Horus, son of Isis and Osiris. Seth, the brother of Osiris. Thoth, the messenger of Ra. And Ra, the chief deity of the Egyptian pantheon. These obviously are not all of the Egyptian gods. The ancient Egyptians had over 2,000 deities, but the ones I just mentioned are basically the main characters. In addition to the 6 deities I'd name, in this video I'm also gonna talk about Apophis, the final boss in Egyptian mythology, and of course, Anubis, bar none the most well-known of all of the Egyptian gods. Now, before we start talking about powers, I want to briefly cover their appearance, so what do they look like? Well, I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that the Egyptian gods were humanoids with animal heads, but in addition to this, all of the Egyptian gods, or at least the most important ones, were believed to have golden skin. Their hair was blue and made of a precious stone called lapis lazuli, and their bones were of iron and silver in color. The only exceptions to this were Osiris, who was most commonly depicted as having green skin, and Seth, who was believed to have red skin. They also were all pretty tall, about 4 meters or so, give or take. Aside from all of this, we get very minor descriptions here and there, like Thoth having wings and Ra being bearded. Now, powers. All of the Egyptian gods have the power to transform into anything they want. I am not sure if they can transform other things. As far as I know, they can't, but they themselves can change into anything they want. In addition, they all have supernatural strength. As for where did that strength capped, hard to say. Another thing they all share is that they are not immortal. They get old and die. They are pretty hard to kill though. Isis survived being decapitated by her son Horus, so they are tough, but they can die. Now, let's get into the meat of the video. How powerful are they? Well, there are many ways to approach this question. For example, the Egyptians believed that Ra was literally the sun, and that Osiris was literally the constellation of Orion. So we could just do that. Ra would be as powerful as a star, and Osiris will be as powerful as a constellation. And we could do this for every other god. However, I think that doing this doesn't do them justice, because the Egyptian gods are a lot more powerful than stars. So I propose we scale them. I'm gonna take one specific feat and use that as a foundation to determine their power. And that feat is the Big Bang. In the very beginning, during a period the Egyptians called Septepi, this was during a time before time, the sun god Ra created the universe, easily putting him at Big Bang levels of power, and this is our starting point. Yes, we're gonna begin at universal. Now, let's go over each god in the same order I introduced them. So first, Osiris. Osiris is consistently equated with Ra. They are treated as two sides of the same coin. This means Osiris's power is similar to that of Ra's, and therefore he is also universal in power. This is supported by the fact that Osiris himself claims no one in Egyptian heaven can contend with his power. However, I have to admit that making Osiris this strong will cause a logical impossibility later when we talk about Ra, but you have to understand that mythology isn't consistent because no culture actually cares about power levels. We're doing this for fun, but if I were to go back in time and ask the ancient Egyptians, hey, how powerful is Osiris? They would beat me up for being a nerd because I'm focusing on the wrong thing. What matters is the message, not their powers. That being said, let's continue talking about their powers. So next one would be Isis. Isis's power. Isis's power. Yeah, nailed it. Isis's power. Isis's power is compared with that of Osiris, which means she can also blow up a universe. She's so powerful, she can hurt her son Horus by chopping his hands. Speaking of, Horus, the son of Isis and Osiris, is an incredibly strong deity. He is more than just Isis plus Osiris. Before he was born, Horus absorbed a non-specific amount of power from all of the Egyptian gods, making him incredibly powerful. He is so strong, it is said all the other Egyptian gods, except for Ra, are afraid of him. His most powerful ability, however, is a spell which I'm going to refer to as the Chaplet of Victory. That way you can Google it in case you want to read it. The Chaplet of Victory is a spell that grants Horus victory over his enemies by making them explode into pieces. Also, it cannot fail. Once it's cast, you are going to go kaboom. The weakness of this spell is that the incantation must be said 4 times in a row, and it is kinda long, so it's probably not something he can do while fighting, but for the spell to work, you just have to be considered an enemy of Horus, so as long as he doesn't like you, he can cast the spell while being far away, and boom. In fact, this is exactly what he did to Seth. And that takes us to Seth, the brother of Osiris. Now, Seth is known by all of the Egyptian gods for his immense strength. So strong is he that he can fight Horus for 80 years. Now, let's not get crazy, they didn't fight continuously for 80 years, they were all daily feuds that went on for 8 decades, but still, that's very impressive. Now, some might try to discredit this by saying something like, actually, they were all political struggles, there were no punches involved, and for anyone that wants to say that, allow me to point to that one time Seth and Horus turned into hippopotamuses and fought for 3 months straight. Seth is so powerful, he survives the Chaplet of Victory. Horus makes him explode into pieces, and then he's fine. And then he goes and fights Horus for a really long time. Seth is so powerful, he can fight a guy who has a portion of his power. Remember, Horus got power from all of the gods. That includes Seth. And then Seth goes and fights him evenly. None can defeat the other. And it is here where Thoth comes into the picture. See, Horus and Seth were fighting because Seth killed Osiris, and so Horus, in revenge, was trying to kill Seth. There's more to it, but that's basically why they were fighting. Eventually, Ra gets tired of this, so he sends Thoth to get them. Thoth then comes down from Egyptian heaven, stops them, and takes them to Egyptian heaven. Thoth is more powerful than both of them combined. But as strong as Thoth is, he doesn't hold a candle to the man himself. Ra. Now remember when I said that Ra created the universe? Well, he did a bit more than that. Aside from making the universe, Ra created a couple of immensely powerful gods. Take for example, Shu. Shu is the air, not the god of air, the embodiment of air itself. And not just the literal air, but also the metaphorical one as well. Shu is the metaphorical breath of life. Wherever Shu exists, Ra has access to. And through this, Ra gains knowledge of almost everything that is happening throughout all of the universe. And that's just one of the deities Ra personally made. Ra is stated to be more powerful than all of the Egyptian gods combined. He is so powerful that even his father, Nu, states Ra is stronger than him. And Nu is so powerful, he says he can solo all of Egyptian heaven by himself. And the funny thing is that this is not actually where it ends, because it could be argued Ra is both omniscient and omnipotent. See, among all the deities Ra created, he created Sia and Heka, literally the embodiments of both knowledge and power. Now I ask you this, how much knowledge do you need to make all the knowledge? It can be argued you need to know everything. How much power do you need to make all the power? It can be argued you need to be omnipotent. So Ra possibly has 2 out of the 3 omnis. The counter to this, however, is this. If Ra really is omniscient, why does he need Shu to collect knowledge? If Ra really is omnipotent, why does he struggle with Apophis? So, is Ra really omniscient and omnipotent? He could be if you wanted him to be, but even if you don't give him omnipotence and omniscience, he is still incredibly powerful and knowledgeable. And yet, despite all of his immense power, Ra will die. Enter Apophis, the final boss of Egyptian mythology and one of the most powerful mythological monsters, period. Every single god I'd mentioned in this video, and in fact many more, all fight Apophis together every night. Apophis fights a lot of gods, just as tall and powerful as any other. But just saying a lot is kinda vague, so I actually do have a concrete number of how many gods Apophis is fighting. 4 million. And so that means that every night Apophis fights against 4 million gods, each of them easily universal in power. So does this mean Apophis has 4 million times the power of the Big Bang? I mean, maybe? Putting power levels aside for a moment, one of the coolest things about Apophis is that the gods aren't safe from him during the day. Apophis is chaotic in nature after all, so sometimes it will attack the sun god during the day, blocking Ra on his path as the god travels through the sky. Today, of course, we call this an eclipse, but you have to admit that the Egyptians had a much cooler interpretation. Lastly, Apophis is not a mindless monster. He is sentient. he can talk. Now with that said, we've covered all the big guys, so let's talk about Anubis. Why did I save him for last, you may wonder? Could it be that he's so powerful he deserves to be the last one? The answer is no. Anubis is, for some reason, the most famous of all of the Egyptian gods. But ironically, in the mythology, he's actually not that important. Look, I'm not saying he's irrelevant, he was important to the Egyptians, Anubis had his purpose, but what I'm trying to say is that he's not a main character. Today Anubis is perceived as the god of the dead, but he's not. Osiris is the god of the dead. Anubis is... well, honestly, he's just an employee. In Egyptian mythology, when someone dies, they go to the Duat, the Egyptian afterlife, and there you are eventually judged to decide whether or not you go to heaven. Anubis' job is to take your heart and put it on a scale. That's it. That's what he does. So like I said, not main character material. Anyways, I think I'm gonna end it here. There's so much more to say about the Egyptian gods. I could talk about how all of the Egyptian gods are actually abstract entities that represent concepts or ideas, like Horus being the embodiment of the concept of royalty. And I could talk about how all of the Egyptian gods are actually just all avatars of Ra. There's so much more I could talk about. But the thing is, I can see how long I've been recording, and I'm already dreading having to edit this thing. I think this is good enough. So let's answer the question. How powerful are the Egyptian gods? Well, let's make it simple and answer in Dragon Ball terms. The Egyptian gods have a really big number. That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.